I discovered that we'd had this multi-million-dollar case that had slipped through our fingers. We called the potential client back. He was gone. He'd hired somebody else. So, it will make you physically sick if you go back and you figure out how many marketing dollars and revenue dollars are actually slipping through your hands because you're not good at answering the phones.
Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm excited about our guest today. You may know his dad. I know it's probably something that he's like, stop associating me with that. I'm my own individual, but hey, we all love Ben Glass. And this is Ben's son, Brian. So really excited to connect with him. We've had Ben on the show, and anybody in the legal community knows what was the book he wrote? Renegade Marketing, something like that.
Renegade Legal Marketing is the book that he wrote years and years ago, and he and I have a revised and updated edition coming out later this year.
Woohoo! I'm excited. Can't wait. I love books. Can't wait to see the revised edition. But let's talk about Brian for a second. So Brian is a partner in his law firm, trial lawyer, real estate investor, ultra runner, and devoted father of 3 boys. Brian, we have fatherhood in common. I've got 7 kids.
Wow.
I think your dad has a bunch of kids too, right?
We got 9. Yeah, he's got 9.
Yeah.
I got 3. I stopped.
I have 3 from my first marriage and 4 with my wife now. So I've got 3 grown adult children, made 3 weddings last year in a 3-month period. That was insane. But I've got 4 little ones at home, probably more close to the 3 that you've got going on. Brian's a trailblazer in the Virginia legal community. Among his results are a $4.2 million auto accident verdict, largest in the state in 2022, a $3.4 million medical malpractice verdict in 2019, and the largest settlement involving the death of a child in Virginia history. And we're really sad about the death of that child. But thank you for representing the parents of that child and getting them something that they can live life with. An entrepreneur at heart, Brian grew the revenue of the auto accident section of Ben Glass Law by 383% in his first 4 years with the firm. That's it? So little? He believes that shaping a law firm that aligns with your values, building a team and client base that you enjoy working with is critical to the success of any law firm. Raised in a family where the law was a way of life, Brian's journey as a lawyer was inspired by his father's dedication to the profession. Today, as a father himself, he seeks to emulate the values he learned from his father, prioritizing family above all else. Brian's vision is not just about amassing wealth, but unlocking financial freedom to create a life that allows him to spend quality time with his family and pursue his passions. And Brian, you're in the right room. And that's because, number one, family is number one for me as well. And that's what I always try to kind of relay here on the podcast. So many people think that business is first. When I succeed in business, then I'll be able to live my life. And the reality is that never happens. And if you're acting that way, there's always going to be new challenges, new problems that are going to come and be the next priority. You have to make a decision about what is important to you. One of the favorite reads that I have, and I share it with my elite clients when they first join. I send them a box, and in that box, I have a book called Living Forward. It's written by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. And that book is all about creating a life plan for yourself in all domains of life. And it's really, really impactful because one of the exercises that the authors have you do is to write your own eulogy. And there's nothing more impactful than thinking about, what do I want to be known for? Like, what is the legacy I want to leave? And here at Profit with Law, our mission is to empower all people with wealth creation so that this and future generations can lead a better life. Inspired by a story from my grandfather, I'll have my team link up an episode where I tell that story, so I don't take the time today to do that. But essentially, I believe that with some really smart management, some good decisions, you can throw a ton of cash off from your firm. And I mean, it says you're a real estate investor. You can take that money and do a lot with it and completely change not just your life and the way you enjoy your existence on earth, but also set up the next generation, whether it's your kids, your grandkids, or whether it's philanthropically somewhere doing some good in the universe that's above and beyond what you do day to day in your firm. So I think that there's a ton of power that we each hold, and our job here is to unlock that and to create the best version of ourselves. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think you and I are really aligned on that. I have not read or heard of that book. And that exercise of writing your eulogy, I think it has always struck me as a little bit dark, but I am a firm believer. Like I'm turning 41 at the end of this month. Statistically speaking, like my ride is halfway over, right?
Right.
And so I'm a firm believer in making sure that the life that you're living today is a life that you want to live and that you're not chasing some additional goalpost, because you're exactly right. There always is another goalpost, another zero, another whatever in the law firm or in your financial life. And chasing that always, with the idea that once I hit it, well, then I'll be happy and then I'll scale back like that. You're right. It never works. So thank you for having me, and thank you for that very kind introduction.
It's my pleasure. And I mean, let's just jump right into this. What I like to do is I like to have our guest really just introduce themselves. So I just read a script off of
Yeah.
a piece of paper that's got your official bio, right? But I mean, how did you get into law? And I mean, one of the things I talk to a lot of clients who are like, yeah, my kid's in law school. I'm hoping that they're going to take over the firm one day. I mean, your dad's living his dream because you're stepping into the shoes that he set up for you to fill, but not everybody's kids do that. So how how did you end up becoming, especially one of nine? Like I'm sure that not all nine are lawyers and working in the firm. What led you to say, "Hey, this is what I want to do," and really step into that role at your dad's firm?
Yeah, no, so we're like a bad joke, right? So it's like a lawyer, a pastor, a firefighter, and a teacher like walk into a bar, and that's the first four children in the family. So how did I get here? I wish I had a better answer to that. So I just never had anything else that I wanted to do. And so as I was in college, I studied philosophy because I was like, that'll serve me in law school. In hindsight, I should have studied business or some kind of hard skill, right? But I just always wanted to be a lawyer, and then I got into law school, and I wanted to be on a stage, effectively be a trial lawyer. I dabbled a little bit early in my career in criminal law, and I didn't like hanging out in the hallway, which is a lot of what criminal law is, especially at the level of misdemeanor and traffic violations that I was doing at the time. And so then I pivoted and did personal injury law, which to me is the greatest use of my time, because you have effectively unlevered yourself from any kind of hourly rate, right? It's all contingency fee based. And so the game becomes, how can you attract larger and larger cases, and how can you create a system that runs them more and more efficiently, and always be increasing your effective hourly rate. So that to me has been, and I call it a game because it's been fun to play with variables and try to move it along. But that's how I got here. And then within the last couple of years, my trial practice has kind of scaled back. Like COVID shut us down for a long time. And I haven't had cases that have been like, this one needs to go to trial. So a lot of stuff has settled recently, which has been a blessing in disguise, right? Because now you could spend more time with the family. It is less stressful when you're not going to trial, but you're kind of out of practice of trying those cases. And so there's a little bit of like, I'm ready to knock the rust off and get back into a courtroom and go try another case. So, always kind of evolving and figuring out what's the next most interesting thing to do with the next year or the next 3 months of your life.
I think it's really interesting because a lot of law firm owners, let's just call it where it is. Probably 80% of our listenership are solos trying to figure out how to navigate beyond themselves, right?
Mm.
And one of the things that in a lot of the conversations I have with people is, they love practicing law,
Mhm.
right? And it's very hard to try on that business owner hat and to really step into what it means to be a business owner. But the reality is that you have to make a choice. Are you a CEO or are you an attorney? And if you want to be an attorney, then hire a CEO. And if you want to be a CEO, you got to give up practicing law. You got to hire an associate and give them everything. later, when you have a level of success and you're not needed every day in other areas of your business, you can pick and choose what you want to practice, what you want to take. And you're in that position now where it's like, hey,
Mhm.
if I want to, I want to get back in the saddle, all I got to do is just pick a case that feels good, looks good, and I'm just going to take this case and run with it. And you do that, for a few cases, and you stay in the game. But you have the ability to do that because of what you've built in this division of Ben Glass Law. So um, I love that you're there, that, hey, I'm still a lawyer. I still love law. And even though I've been not practicing as we built out this division, but now that it's
Mm.
self-producing, I have the ability to go back and do that.
Yeah, and so I think uh, in one regard, I think you're right about that dichotomy of like you can either be the skilled practitioner or you can be the skilled CEO because they're completely different knowledge sets and you only have, 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week that you're working, right? Depending on how hard you want to work. Um, in the other, I do think it's really before you make that jump and say, I want to be the COO or I want to be the CEO and I don't want a lawyer anymore. Doing this exercise of what are the things about lawyering that I actually enjoy doing and what are the things that I really don't? And how can I hire somebody into the skill set that I don't like doing? So for me, it's discovery. And I'm sure for many trial lawyers, it's discovery. It's answering interrogatories, sitting for depositions, preparing for depositions, talking to clients like for case status updates in the middle. I don't like doing all that stuff. But I wanted to build a place where I could sit on top of 10 or 12 or 15 cases, high level cases, and say the only thing that I want to work on is strategy. And so I need people under that system who can be great executors and can take great care of the clients on the journey. Because your clients never know, could you have gotten them a better result or a worse result, but they always know exactly how they felt along the way, right? So they have to be well taken care of. And so that's really what we've tried to build is a system that processes and works on all of the quote easy cases without my involvement. And then I get to pick and choose and work on the intellectually stimulating stuff that's kind of at the top of the pyramid. And so my goal going into 2025 really is like I only want to be in charge of somewhere between 10 and 15 cases, and I only want to work on cases that are worth at least $100,000 in fees to the firm.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for bringing it full circle, because yeah, when I say, hey, you got to be the CEO and not be practicing law, it doesn't mean that you can't be involved on the strategy side, right? And it doesn't mean you can't do anything. You're your own boss. You can do whatever you want. But what I found is that the real way to allow growth to happen in your firm is when you stop viewing yourself as the attorney. As
Mhm.
long as you view yourself as the attorney, you're the man, you're the woman, you're the person that has to handle the work. You're limited in what you can do. I mean, Clio did a report in their legal trends report in 2000, I think it was 2019 or 2020. I really have to look up because I keep referencing it. But they did a study on the billing hours of a solo law firm.
Mhm.
And what they came out with was, on average, a solo attorney bills 2.1 hours a day and collects on 1.8 hours a day.
Wow.
That is the average billing for a solo attorney. Now, even if you're not billing hourly or whatever, that's the productive legal work that you're performing. And somebody listening to that is going to say, "What are you talking about? Yesterday, I just spent 6 hours." Yeah, but today you're spending zero, right? Like,
Mhm.
look at the average of what you're spending throughout the year. Now, hire an associate. They're working 8 hours a day. You're treating them like a human being. You're not driving them. You're not making them work late, work weekends, or anything like that. They're taking a lunch break. They're taking coffee, bathroom breaks, whatever. You're getting 6 hours a day of
Mhm.
productivity out of them. That's 3 times the amount you can ever do as a solo law firm owner. The more that you stay the attorney in your business, the more you're holding yourself back from growing, you're holding your growth back. And Brian, I invite you to interject. I mean, you grew a whole division, right? Like,
Uh,
what's the thing that drives growth the most? Is it adding an attorney?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. So we just finished up a boot camp here with Great Legal Marketing. We had 15 law firms in, and as part of the work before that 2-day boot camp, sent them a survey, and I said, "What are the 3 things that you want for your firm 3 years from now? And what are the 3 things that are holding you back from getting there?" And 80% of the results talked about time. I don't have enough time. I don't have the right people, and I'm the bottleneck for everything. I said, man, if we could just solve for you being the bottleneck for everything, if you can empower somebody else to make some decisions or most of the decisions, that frees you up to really drive the strategy for everything else. But if you're the one who's answering, every question about can we take this case, or every time the client calls, like you're picking up the phone, you're never going to free yourself from that. And so is it hiring? Is it hiring another attorney? Maybe it's, I've heard the two things you need to do are, number one, exit yourself from intake, and number two, exit yourself from the attorney work. And so for us, the biggest change that we made in 2024 was getting a real live in-person, local, not VA intake person. And
Hmm.
so our evolution has been from, receptionist who sets up a call with Brian, to then we moved to a VA, to finally we moved to an in-house English speaking full-time person who, and each step along that ladder, we got a little bit of improvement. But really what I wanted was somebody in-house who could run down the hallway screaming like her hair is on fire when a big case is on the phone, right? It's just something you're missing when you have that out of the office offshore VA, which is what we had and which what worked for 2 years. But every time we've increased our conversion rate on cases, we have found all of these cases that we weren't even, getting back to in time before, especially in like the SEO, PPC. I found you on the internet, and if you can't respond to me right now, I'm moving on to the next person.
Right.
So levering up your ability to bring in those cases and seeing your people as assets instead of, payroll responsibilities, right? I think that's the biggest problem for most lawyers and small firms is we don't trust ourselves to, if I hire the intake person or if I hire the associate, to be able to generate enough business to support that person and still bring home enough money for my family.
Yeah, it's very true because they go hand in hand, right? Like you've got to get a marketing system that is repeatable and predictable, and you also need to have the capacity to handle what that repeatable and predictable system is bringing
Mm,
in. So you kind of need to do both at the same time, and that's really jumping off the diving board into the pool and not being sure that you know how to swim.
mhm.
And that's really
Everybody,
where
yeah, everybody
where
wants to
attorneys
focus
are.
on how do I get more cases coming through the pipeline, but then once they start coming through, most law firms have not thought through how do we, have a dedicated person or dedicated system to converting them.
Yeah. Now it's interesting because you just brought me full circle to another legal survey that Clio did in their Clio Legal Trends report. And this one I know was in 2019. They contacted 2,000 law
Mm,
firms and they pretended to be a
mhm,
client seeking legal services. An astonishing, I'm sure you've heard this one before, an astonishing 67% of law firms did not answer the phone
mhm.
or did not return the initial message that
That's
was left,
crazy. Yeah.
which means that if you answer the phone, you're in the top one third of all law firms out there, which is insane. But that's the reality is that we think, oh, I need more leads. I need, I
Mhm.
need more things coming in the door when in reality, are we really doing everything we need to do to actually handle the ones that are coming in? Sometimes we don't even know they're coming in because the phone rang, it went to voicemail, they didn't leave a message, right? So we just assumed that it was a wrong number. No, that was a multi-million dollar case that was ringing, and you just let
Oh,
it go to voicemail.
I'm going to make you sick here. So first of all, but Jason Hennessy has updated that study, and he does it every year. But his 2024 results, he did the same thing with he filled out 1,400 lead forms on various lawyers' websites, and most people do get back. But what you recognize is, okay, if you're in a larger market with big spenders and with great response intake teams, your window to respond to those things is very small. So most markets have a firm that's getting back in 30 minutes, right? Some of the firms are like they're responding to lead forms in an average of 3 minutes, which is crazy. And if you're a small firm, there's no way you can keep up with that, right? So that tells you something about competing in digital marketing. But I just had to let our front desk receptionist go because we had exactly that happen. We had a guy who had been in the hospital in the ICU for 18 days because he'd been run over by a trash truck. So bad injury, liability, good insurance coverage. The call drops 4 minutes into the phone call with my front desk guy. He doesn't put the thing into the lead system. Tries to call him back twice. We don't connect. And then nothing happened until we went back and we listened to a couple of calls because we were spot checking. Is he doing a good job? Because he's relatively new. And in 2 days later, I discovered that we'd had this multi-million-dollar case that had slipped through our fingers. We called the potential client back. He was gone. He'd hired somebody else. So it will make you physically sick if you go back and you figure out how many marketing dollars and revenue dollars are actually slipping through your hands because you're not good at answering the phones.
Yeah, I mean, this is really true, and I know it's not where we wanted. We were planning to take this
Yeah.
conversation, but the reality is that having a system and really, it's interesting because when I work with clients who are solos who are trying to get outside of it, they come in and they're like, I know I need systems in place. And I tell them, no, actually, you don't need systems yet. What you
Mhm.
need is an attorney and a marketing spend. And when we have cases coming in and that attorney's busy, now we can focus on systems. Like if you're focusing on systems early,
Mhm.
that's the wrong time. But that's just the timing of it. That's not me saying you don't need it. What's interesting is that everything that you talk about, which is, having that solid intake, having that great customer service experience, all of that requires repeatable processes. It
Mhm.
requires a system for everything so that when that phone rings, the same thing is happening every single time. When a client is engaged, they're getting the same experience every time. If you don't do that, like if you don't have a system in place and people have a variety of experiences, you're going to get exactly that on your Google reviews. And you're
Mhm.
going to get exactly that in people hiring you because there's going to be people who are, you know, mad, upset, 1 star reviewing you, and there's going to be people who are thrilled and 5 star reviewing you. And when somebody comes to hire a vendor, I'm going through that right now. I'm flattening my backyard. I'm spending $70,000 plus on this project, and every single little thing, the fence, the electrician for running a conduit, like all these different things, I'm going out and I'm looking for vendors. And when I get that smattering of good and bad, to me, it's a signal, stay away.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I want somebody who everybody's got a great experience. And the whiners, the 1 star reviewers, like you look at them and they're like, this person's truck can't drive. Like they cut me off on the road. Like, okay, fine. That doesn't say anything about their quality of their
Uh-huh.
work and their ability to do their job. So great. I'm happy and comfortable using them. I think, you know, we if we made decisions about running our firm from the perspective of what would our clients say when we were done, it would completely change the dynamic of how we operate.
Yeah. And you're exactly right that so many of us go out and we try to construct these big systems before we have a need for them. But the bridge between, solo operator and systems running firm is core values and having a core set of guidelines that your team can operate on, right? So one of our intake core values is speed. Like just get back quickly. I don't need to have a system that says, call somebody within 2 hours. If you don't get a hold of them, call them again 4 hours later and call them the next day and send them a text. And I don't need all of that. What I need for you to know is speed is important. The new lead comes in, you have to get back to them, needs to go into the system, and then we can deal with what is the rest of the process that happens there. But you don't have to build all of that because the time and the effort that you spend building that out, well, you might end up with a system that doesn't actually work because you haven't been, tinkering and working with it while you were building it. So at the beginning, your team just needs to know what are the 3 or 4 things that are really important and how can they flexibly work within those to meet the goals of the firm.
Yeah, I love that you brought it back to core values because one of the things that core values does is it empowers your team to make decisions that are reflective
Yes.
of decisions you would make yourself.
Yes.
And getting really clear on those is important. And I, as you were saying, like speed is a core value for your intake. It's interesting because I never broke out core values for specific parts of the company, right? Like it's just here's our core values. So I love that, but also like it's almost like if I could just explain to my receptionist or the person answering the phone that one missed call or one person not
Mhm.
called back quickly could be their salary for the next 10 years, right? Like it's almost like we have to put it in perspective in a way that they can understand. Like this is, it's not this is not
Hmm.
something that you can just sneeze at. Like, oh, it's no big deal. I didn't answer the phone, right? No, it is a big deal. It could be a multi-million-dollar phone call, and to stay on your game for all day long, in that way, really takes a deep understanding of what the true purpose of what you're doing is.
That's right. And again, to bring totally full circle, like flipped on its head, that's how you change your mindset and begin to invest in your firm. Because if you don't have somebody in that role, then the one missed call that you don't even know about could have funded that role for the next 10 years. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the way that I think about a lot of investments in people and in systems, tech systems here is like, well, how many cases do I need to acquire to make this thing ROI positive? Right. Knowing your average case value and then knowing just how it only takes a handful. And to your point about 67% of law firms weren't even calling somebody back. Like the barrier to being a great customer service law firm is not that high.
Yeah, 100%. And so, I mean, let's talk about customer service for a moment.
Hmm.
Because like you just said, the barrier is not that high. But what makes a firm great at customer service? What do customers actually want? What do they actually
Yeah.
appreciate? I think
Yeah.
a lot of lawyers out there think that what makes a great customer experience is that I get them a win.
Hmm.
And the reality is that I think it's possible to have a customer lose at the end and still have them thrilled with having used your firm,
Hmm.
right? Which is crazy to think about.
What your clients think is a win and what you think is a win is oftentimes very, very different. And so, gaining an understanding from the beginning of what does the person on the other end of the phone actually want. And in the auto accident world, a lot of times it's not, I want a big settlement at the end, right? Sometimes it's as simple as I need somebody to help me get into a rental car quickly so that I can get back to my job on Tuesday, right? I need somebody to help me understand how we pay the medical bills as the case is going on. Sometimes it is, I want a really big result at the end, and sometimes that's completely untethered to reality. And so, for me, the customer service, good customer service in a law firm means the client, once we've agreed that we're going to work on their case, is aligned with what we can actually achieve, right? So I think that's an important part of the intake call, or the first, if you're having a sales team do that, the first call with a lawyer is like trying to make sure that we're aligned on the end result. I'll give you an example. I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago whose child was injured at a local daycare, and I jumped into all of this stuff about immunity issues and negligence and blah blah blah. And the only thing that he cared about was, can we make the daycare worker not work in a daycare anymore? Right? It's a result that is, I can't make that happen. Um, and had we not had that conversation, I would have been running down to how do I get him the most amount of money, and that goal is not even important to him, right? So making sure that you're aligned on the goals, I think, is important. Number one, and then number two, once you have that, setting up a system, and most of these cases can be run on systems where the client never actually has to ask what's going to happen next because you've proactively told them your case is in this stage. Here's the most frequently asked questions of people when they're in this stage. Here's what we think is going to happen next. And if you'd like to set up a call, we can set up a call, right? Installing, we use Hona, which is an app that sends all that stuff out and it's tied into our case management system. So as cases move to the next stage, client gets a push notification about what's happening in their case. Installing that system has cut back on 75% of the phone calls that we get saying, what's going on in my case? Okay. And it's not because my team is putting in really any more effort to communicate that. It's because the client receives something from us with a video and with some frequently asked questions about what's going to happen next. And so just being informed on their case is like step one to delivering a great customer service. And then, the plus on that is empowering your team when somebody's having a bad day or somebody's just had surgery to like buy a gift, send some flowers, send some homemade soup, send some local food delivery, something like that. Empowering the team to make good decisions without having to ask you that will improve the customer service experience.
Yeah, I love both things that you shared. Quick story about the first one. So I just had a conversation with an attorney in the New York area, and he was like, he's a trial lawyer, right? So every PI case that comes in the door, he's trying to get max value out of.
Hmm.
And he's like, I don't understand. Like, how am I supposed to hire somebody when it takes me 3 to 5 years to get money out of a case?
Hmm.
Right? Like my time frame is just way out there. He's like, what are other firms doing? And I said, well, other firms are not looking at every case as a max value
Hmm.
case, right? And you're thinking, well, that means I'm not going to be doing right by my client if I don't get the max value. But have you ever asked somebody who came to you, which is more valuable, a quick win, getting, $50,000 in the bank in 6 months, or getting a $300,000 payout 5 years from now?
Hmm.
But so many people who come through our doors would rather have $50,000 6 months from now. As crazy as it sounds to people who maybe don't need $50,000 in 6 months,
Hmm.
right? And would rather wait and get that $300,000 payout. But so many of the clients that you're taking to that max value really aren't even trying to get that. So it's not, look, you painted the picture of like, hey, maybe they're not even looking for the payout. I think even within the scope of the payout, maybe they're more interested in a pre-suit settlement than litigating. Maybe they're interested in litigating until that you can get a max settlement, but they don't want to actually go to trial. Like having that conversation on the front end and really understanding what's important to them. And and then having open conversation during the engagement of, hey, now is a good opportunity if you want to settle for us to ask for a settlement and see what they offer,
Hmm.
because it's looking bad for them and nobody wants to take you to trial. Here's what I think you can get if we take it all the way to the finish line, how long it'll take, but let's see what we can get now. Like giving your client that opportunity um, is something that I think is prudent for every attorney to do, but most of us just assume that this is what the client wants, and we don't even have that conversation. So I think clear client communication is really important. And this brings us back to number two that you had, which you're talking about giving client updates, right? And I think that what makes somebody happy is when you set the right expectations and you
Hmm.
never renege on those expectations, which means that you're setting a timeline. And if that timeline is going to be breached, you're having a proactive conversation
Hmm.
with them to explain it's not going to we're not going to hit this the way that we said that we would. Here's why. Here's the new expectation. What we tend to do as human beings is we don't want to have that confrontational conversation, which we think is confrontational. So we're just not going to have it at all. And then it's late. Now the client is wondering, have you forgotten about me?
Hmm.
Why have I not gotten a phone call? Why has this not happened? Now you're doing damage control instead of being proactive. And one of the things that I think every law firm can do is to create like an infograph of the process for whatever your client's engaging you for. And it's just kind of like almost like if you think like a Candyland kind of roadmap of here's the stages of the journey we're about to take together. Here's what you can expect and how long it'll take. And I think that something like that is something that they can always refer back to and be like, oh, okay, we're in this 9 month time frame that nothing was going to happen. So we're good. And instead of you needing to keep updating them, I think that setting that expectation up front is really powerful. So love what you're doing with Hona. Know nothing about the platform. Um, but I'm a big believer in create a system that you can do manually first and
Hmm.
then find technology
Yeah.
to automate it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because so many times we buy the bell and whistle first, and then we're like, okay, I implemented it, but now what? But what if you didn't record the videos that go with it, right? Like, so now they're getting a communication, but it's not the best communication you can do. Let's create that process first, and then find the tool that's going to automate that for you.
It's funny that you say that because that's exactly why I bought Hona. Like we were already doing it manually. I'd shot these videos about case stages. They were hosted on Vimeo, and our case management software would like it was assigned to paralegal would go in and text the link to the client when it updated. So that was kind of a clunky experience. And then I met my friends from Hona. at a conference, and I said, I'm already doing that. Like, where do I sign? I'm also a big fan of the no update, right? I mean, you talked about the 9-month period where we expect nothing to happen. Well, you may have told the client once that nothing's going to happen for 9 months, but I don't know about you, but my clients always, if I give them a range, they always hear the top end of the range, the most
Right.
optimistic end of the range. And so if I say, I don't think anything's going to happen for 9 months, you're still going to get those calls about what's going on in the case. So I like, once a month or so, even if there's no update, saying, hey, just letting you know, we're still thinking about you. Here's what I did to try to provoke a response, but the insurance company hasn't done anything. So just letting you know, we're still here. Do you have any questions? And the number one complaint about lawyers, the number one thing that leads to bar complaints and legal malpractice complaints is lack of communication. So if you can just focus a little bit of effort on how do we solve for that, you will have happier clients, less bar complaints, and certainly fewer negative Google reviews.
Yeah, I love that. And absolutely true. Although if you keep sending the same communication out, that gets old
Oh,
and
don't do
tired
that.
too. I
Yeah.
can tell you from my own experience with my trademark attorney, right? Like love what he does, what he set up and everything. And I did a whole podcast episode of, calling him out, but in a good way, because I loved the experience I had with them. But the no updates that they were sending was just the same message over and over again. And to me, it felt like, okay, you've stuck me into an automated system,
What were
right?
they were texting you or emailing you?
I get all, so it comes from like their case management software. So it comes as a notification for the app, comes as a text message, and as an email.
Yeah, so I think that should be a phone call, right? I think that should be a paralegal or the lawyer, like once a day, once a month. Just call your clients and say, "Hey, just thinking about you. No update in the case. Anything I can do for you?" Right? Most of the time, the answer is going to be no. Occasionally, you're going to hear some complaint about why is it taking so long. But that personal touch. Listen, this is why people do repeat business with you. This is why people refer business to you. And if you've ever handled a case where somebody's had a previous crash and it was 4 years ago and they don't remember who their lawyer was, well, that's why, because they were missing that personal connection with the person. And so just thinking about how can we increase the number of real engagements and real personal touch points in an era where everybody is going to AI and everybody is going to automation. Like you just have to be a little bit different and take the time and effort to make those calls.
I love that personalization, and I'll even give you something to think about, which is not all clients are on top of the case
Mm-hmm.
and worried about why didn't they hear from you. In
Mm-hmm.
my example with the trademark attorney, I did multiple trademarks with them. Well, there was one trademark application that I didn't even remember I submitted. And it came back with a request for clarification on something. They sent the response. It should have moved to the next step, but it never did. It wasn't until I received communication from them on a different one that I dove into the software and noticed an open case. And I was like, why is this thing open? And I looked at it and I was like, nothing's happened in a year. What is going on with this? And I asked them about it. And then they're like, oh, we should have heard back by now. We'll reach out and check. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden things started moving again. So it's like the fact that you're not on top of it meant that it fell through the cracks. Now, it obviously wasn't that important to me because
You'd
I
forgotten
wasn't on
also.
top of it, right? It
Yeah.
it 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 didn't matter to
Yeah.
me, but it mattered because it now sent me a signal saying, you're not on top of my stuff. Like I
Mm.
expect you to be on top of my stuff, and you're not on top of it. So I think that there's a lot of different ways that this can manifest itself in how your client experiences it. But if you're on top of your cases, even in these periods of no man land where nothing needs to be done, and to Brian's point, picking up the phone and calling, it'll elicit conversations like, "Oh, I didn't even realize this was still going on. Shouldn't we be further along? No, 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 we're good. We're good." Like, but it forces you to touch every file,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And maybe pick up on, hey, why is this a no update?
Yeah.
Something should have happened. Or
Yeah.
in your world of I mean, your clients need to be treating,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
they're in this period of no man's land because they're treating. Like if they haven't heard from your firm, what's the likelihood that they're going to every doctor's appointment and sticking to that treatment schedule, right? I mean, it depends on the injury, but for a lot of them, like if they're going to physical therapy, it's a time suck, right? Like it takes commitment to do that. And I mean, I know I had foot surgery and I was supposed to do PT for a lot longer than I did, but I got tired of the time commitment and I was like, I feel good enough. I'm going to stop going. And I'm probably paying for it today because I didn't heal my
Hmm.
foot to the 100% that I needed to get it to.
Hmm.
And I think that your clients would do better if you were on top of that.
Yeah, like you've also still got to do the good work. All of this stuff is nice icing, but the cake has to be pretty good to begin with. So, don't start focusing on customer service if you're not already a good lawyer and you can't already handle the clients. And for God's sake, don't put any more marketing dollars behind acquiring new clients if you don't have a process. We're helping and serving the ones that you already have.
Yeah. So Brian, I think this question has been at the forefront of my mind. The whole conversation hasn't come up yet. So I just want to come back to it because we're almost out of time. So maybe this is going to be like the last segment of our conversation. In your bio, right? It says that you grew the revenue of the auto accident division by
Yeah,
383% in the first 4 years with the firm. And I know that my listeners were listening to that, and some of them are saying, yeah, he was able to do it because he stepped into Ben Glass law. Like
sure.
he had the resources, he could do whatever he wants, right? He had no challenges doing that. That some people have, that's what came to mind for them. So what I would like to know from you is from where you came from, because you may not have ever experienced what somebody who starts a law from scratch experiences, but in your experience in growing that division, what do you think was, if you had to like pinpoint like the
Hmm.
number one key to the growth of that 383% growth? What do you think the number one key to that was? If it, I know there's a lot of things,
Yeah.
and I know it's unfair to say just pick one, but there's got to be something that like, okay, this like if I and looking back on it, maybe I would have done this sooner, but
Mhm.
this is the thing that I think was the most impactful in driving that.
So speed and then changing the mindset of which cases we were taking, right? So when I arrived, here's the injury practice that I walked into, right? 60 in the 2 years before I got there, 60 or 75% of our money came from one or two cases. In one of those years, it came from a medical malpractice trial verdict, right? And in Virginia, medical malpractice trials are basically a coin flip. And so that could have been a really profit negative year. And so the issue that we had was the case selection criteria was, is this something that I think the client can't do on their own? And so we were only accepting, the big, interesting, complex, difficult to manage cases. And we were saying no to a lot of people who had problems that we could solve that we didn't deem worthy of us solving and getting paid for. So it was a mindset shift within the department of what value are we providing, right? And I'll give you an example. Um, we were there are all these cases where it's like you could do this on your own. You could figure this out. Let me give you a book on how to handle your auto accident case and how to settle your case on your own. Well, most people don't want to do that. And so and I know this because 3 months into me being here, I said, let's do this. Let's just call back everybody who called us in the last 12 months and find out what happened with their case, right? We talked to them at some point, we rejected their case, or we were waiting for more information. Let's just call them back and see where they are. And probably 25 to 30% of those people hadn't found another lawyer. They were still sitting with the case. They hadn't solved the problem on their own. And so we said, come on in. Hey, we'll help you. And then we just replicated that with other people who had smaller cases. So we lowered the barrier to, you have a legal problem that I can help you solve. We expanded the client pool. And without spending an additional marketing dollar, we increased the number of cases that were coming through the funnel just because we went out in search of different problems. And I don't think it's a lot more complicated than that. It really was speed and then the mindset of the person who was in charge of saying yes or no to auto accident cases in 2018.
Yeah, it's interesting because, your answer is very specific to PI, and I'm just trying to like think about how do I expand this to other practice areas, other
Yeah,
listeners who maybe are not doing PI or they're not saying no to those
yeah,
smaller cases, right? Um, and I think, I mean, first of all, don't get the wrong message, right? Brian is not saying say yes to everything,
No.
because that's what really gets you in trouble. Like, trying to be a lawyer that does everything for everybody is not the way to achieve success or to win, on this journey that you're on. You have to be able to have a very focused marketing effort, a very deliberate process in creating systems on your team so that things can be repeatable and reproducible. So you have to choose who you're going to serve.
Mhm.
But in doing so, in choosing, don't assume that the value that you're providing is only great to a certain segment or in a certain area. Like, I think that's the takeaway, is like, and it goes back to something we already talked about this earlier, which is, don't make assumptions about what somebody wants,
Mhm.
right? Um, I have this conversation with clients around how much they charge. So in PI, you don't have that problem because the contingency
Mhm.
is what it is, right? But in other areas, whether they're billing hourly or whether they've transitioned to a flat fee or some sort of value-based model, um, a lot of attorneys are afraid to charge more because that's what the marketplace is charging, right? And we just talked about how only 1/3 are answering the phone, right? And
Mhm.
even speed to answering the phone is important. When somebody is sitting in front of you, they have a problem, they want a solution. They're willing to pay for that solution. Don't underestimate the value that you're providing to them. Treat every single one of them as just a human being who needs something solved. Can
Mhm.
we solve it for them? Not do we want to, not do we think there's value. Can we solve it for them? And then explain to them what that would cost to solve if you were to do it for them. Let them decide whether the value is there, whether the ROI is there. You don't know. I mean, it could be that they're going to pursue, like, I had this conversation with a real estate, litigation attorney, and they're like, well, I'm not going to charge 450 an hour because these small cases that are worth $10,000, they're going to come out cash negative. I said, great, just tell them that,
Mhm.
because some people want to spend the money because they want to send a message. They want to make sure it doesn't happen to them again. Like, there's other reasons to go ahead and litigate, even if the ROI is not there. So just put the cards on the table and let them make their own decision instead of you deciding for them, because then you're essentially making assumptions about the outcome, which we're terrible at that.
Mhm. Yeah, you have no idea what's going on in somebody else's mind, or what other 19 problems they have to solve other than this, that you're now freeing them up to go and solve while you take the legal problem off of their hands.
Yeah. So I think that's the way to take that, that piece that you shared, and kind of translate it into what other people are doing in their own practice
Mhm.
areas. We're just about out of time, Brian, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about this. I understand that Great Legal Marketing hosts a summit of some kind. I'd like you to just talk about that, and I think that you have an offer for the notes of the previous summit that people can get for free. I want to give you an opportunity to share that. So, if you can leave our audience with one parting piece of wisdom or advice, and then share how they can access that, a little bit about the summit, and we'll close this out.
Yeah, oh, geez. Parting piece of wisdom or advice. Man, here's the thing: is you're on a one-way trip through life, and the more time and effort that you spend chasing somebody else's goals or chasing, the milestone that doesn't actually serve the thing that you want to achieve in your life, the less time you have to enjoy it. So that's my one piece of advice for everybody. So we host a 3-day summit. It's an in-person summit this year. It's in Phoenix, Arizona, from October 3rd through the 5th. If you have no experience with us, the best thing for you to do is to download the professionally transcribed notes of last year's summit. You can grab those at glmsummitnotes.com. It's 84 pages of action-packed stuff from all of our speakers from last year. And if it speaks to you, then coming out to this conference will be a good fit.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Brian, for your time, for your expertise and knowledge today. This was a great conversation. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you learned something from it, and you're not yet subscribed to the show, we do this every single week. Every Thursday, we drop a brand new episode with another expert leader, somebody who has achieved a level of success in something that perhaps you want to be successful at too, and you can learn from the best. So make sure you hit the subscribe button in your podcast player so you're checking out our show every time it comes out on Thursday mornings. And if you have the time to leave us a rating and review, we'd appreciate that, because other listeners come, they check the show out, and they're like, hey, is this something I should listen to? And they're going to go and they're going to check out those ratings and reviews. So leaving that is just going to help the next person who comes by. We'll be here next week with another great episode. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care. We'll see you next week. Bye now.